quite a broad thing to say, but there's a lot of boldness. There's a lot of like big, brave kind of like slabs of things that have been slammed down on the paper or on the screen or something, which is really, really good to see. I think that's a really interesting thing for me to see these like big, bold moves. Things need to say like a little bit more than just sort of like shout out and pop and be beautiful. They need to sort of like have that reason as well. They need to have the reason to exist. So I think the backstory is really important for me. So when I'm judging today, I'm sort of like really carefully looking at like the brief, and I'm looking at how they answered that brief and then how it was executed. So I think that whole thing is like, for me personally, like a very important thing. I'm actually just whilst we're chatting now, I'm halfway through the photography section, which I think is really, really strong. There's some really, really nice stuff in there. Some of the poster design work as well was really, really good. There are a few things in particular that I would hope can go on to win a pencil, because I think there was some really, really great work in there. Again, you know, whether that's something to do with like scale and that thing of like boldness, you know, you've got the space to allow your creative to sort of like be nice and big and strong on a big scale, but it's so there's some really, really nice stuff in there. We all take inspiration from everything. We all take inspiration from everything that we see in terms of a design field or the things that we see when we go past on a bus. But what I like to see is those inspirations aren't a particularly obvious thing when you look at the work. You know, maybe they're sort of like hidden in the background, and then they're in your mind when you're processing what your end outcome is going to be, but they're not necessarily there to be seen for me as a judge. So I think that's a really important thing. Take your inspirations and not literally drop them down on page or on screen so that they're visible to us all. Massively so for me. I think that maybe comes from maybe my background in magazines. Like when we first started off many years ago, not 10 years ago, something like that, with our magazines, it was just really important where everything came from. Everything had to have a reason to be in there. Like when you actually make a mag, you're squeezing everything into 100 pages or something, so every little inch of every single page is sort of like precious real estate, so everything has to have a reason for being there. I think sometimes people seem to, what's the right word to say, to take like an easy way out to a problem. You sort of like, especially when I'm looking at the context of it, so I'm looking at the brief and I can see how that brief's been answered, and I kind of like can't help but sort of read that little brief myself and think, oh, if it might have just been able to go like a little bit more. So some of the stuff that I've not felt as passionate about, it's mainly because it sort of feels like it's 80% there or 75% of the way there, but it just feels like there's a little bit more to give. And I think that's the value of something like a yellow pencil, where it is, you know, I was at university and that was like the holy grail when I was at university, and now actually like being part of the process, like you really understand why, because you have to go that extra mile, and I think that's the thing for me. It's just that the ones that haven't quite made the grade are the ones that just didn't go quite far enough. Who stopped it short? It's an interesting question. I mean, it could come from the agency itself, or as you say, it could come from the client. So I guess one person always pointed the other one to sort of like point the finger of blame. But yeah, but maybe that's where it needs somebody who's sort of like quite vocal to push that thing forward. So whether it be the creative director or whether it be someone at the client that's just got that little bit more kind of like, you know, they're willing to put the neck on the line, maybe get a bollocking from their boss, but they've pushed it that little bit further.